All right. So, Alex, Ange, thank you so much for hopping on. We're gonna have millions, if not billions, people listening from abroad, all over the world, and the theme of this webinar is really how to balance speed and compliance with a truly global workforce. And so, intentionally, we're going to actually go in the reverse order. So, we're going to start with global. We're then going to go compliance. We're then going to go speed. And so, you two, I'll give a little bit of a little show off, a little flirting. You two are by far the world's leader in that reverse order. So, you're both globalized. You both deeply understand compliance. One of the big things when we first met, both of you, was you're both willing to take on a bunch of risk because you know how good your technology and your processes are, which all comes back to speed. So, without further ado, I'm actually going to start this while people start to pile in. Alex and Ange, I want you both to give us what you're going to be doing this Friday night and then what you're going to be doing on Sunday morning. Who wants to be the brave soul that goes first?
Wow, my brain has not gone that far into the
Yeah,
future.
yeah.
We can do last Friday. We just want to see how cool you guys are. It's really what we're
Friday
trying to do.
nights, I am pickleballing. Usually I'm spending time doing on the pickleball court with the neighborhood gang, and then Sunday mornings is mad chaos out the door to try to get to church on time. I know, exciting, riveting stuff. I cannot wait to edge of your street thriller weekend on my side.
It's a true Texas story, actually. It's a true Texas story, you know?
Yes.
And then wait till the kids are older. It's going to be Friday night football and then Sunday church. So it's
Yeah.
a true Texas story.
Yeah.
Alex, what about you? And I guess I
I think I will have actually a party with my team members. I think in one fancy restaurant, and I probably will have a hangover the following day. So something like this,
Sunday.
yeah. Something like this.
A tale of two leaders. There you go.
Yeah.
Wholesome church and family, and I'm getting black. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to get rolling. So, and for those in the chat, put your location, and for those listening, also put the number one thing that you hope to walk away with this. And one of those number one things might be you might want a playbook, you might want customer stories, you might want statistics, you might just want to walk away going, "Wow, I learned so much." All those are going to happen. So, you both, let's do a quick little intro on yourselves and your companies. And one thing that I do want to share is that when we look at, as we go through this webinar, we are going to be giving some data and statistics. You both have access to some of the largest databases of where the workforce is actually going. But without further ado, we'll go in this order. So Ange, you first, then Alex, quick little intro on yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for having myBasePay and myself onto the show, the webinar today. My name is Angela. Obviously, my background has really been in the workforce ecosystem, specifically the deployment of contract labor solutions around the world. I don't know how the hell I ended up here in my career, but boom, I've been doing this since I graduated from school. I've spent some time across some very large, reputable organizations, the likes of which I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to work with. And then more notably, as of about 4 years ago, almost, I and Cesar Jimenez, our amazing and talented CEO, launched myBasePay. We are a workforce solutions company that offers a variety of different products relative to contingent labor. That includes employer of record, agent of record, global talent pool specializations, and staffing. So everything in between when it comes to project-based labor and the regulatory aspects that accompany that. So thanks for having me again.
I love it. And Alex, over to you, bud.
Okay, cool. My name is Alex. Thanks for having me today. I'm actually helping Mellow work with their clients and grow rapidly in the US, UK, and Europe markets. And I play kind of a linchpin role between brand, sales, and marketing functions. And talking about us, we are an HR platform, that simplifies contingent workforce management by automating three main things, basically: onboarding, payments, and compliance. So you just add your teams within our platform, and by one day you can pay for their work while we are handling all like local and international laws, and we are responsible for those things because we work as a contractor of record solution, meaning that we act as an intermediary between your contractors and your company. And basically, this thing allows us to save you thousands or maybe like even ten thousands of dollars each month. And which is more important, I think, freeing your HR and legal staff from endless compliance and paperwork. And yeah, we are doing this thing for more than 10 years. Previously, we had like a business which was named as a solar staff, and we decided like to pivot uh, like basically this year. Um, Me as a specialist, I somehow, was I think my path was determined in a way because I was supposed to be working in a sphere. When I was a kid, I stacked books in shops. Then I work as a copywriter, as an event manager, as a radio host. So like the whole concept of doing this like part-time work was really appealing to me. And I also worked as a comp specialist. I decided like to have a degree in social science, and I saw this like this inside world of freelancing, basically with late payments, uncertainty, freedom, and all those things. So now I help in Mellow, as I told you, and we have more than 1,000 clients across the globe, including like Peltalk, G2G, some SAP, Prequel, I think Bloomreach, and other like really fancy names. So yeah, thank you.
Of course. So listen, here's going to be the first fun exercise, all right? And it's going to sort of preview everything that we're going to talk about. So what's really important about you both is that as individuals, you didn't have to be doing what you're doing now. And I think I can't understate or overstate that enough. And you could work at any talent solution in the world that you wanted to. Alex, you could work at any tech company in the world if you wanted to. You could even stay, an independent contractor, freelancer, you name it. You guys both don't need to be doing what you're doing. But what was that moment that you realized, and Ange, from you, I'm going to go modernize the EOR, or Alex, from you, I'm going to enable a fully, truly global workforce. If we could, in sort of like the under 30-second snippet, when was that moment? Was it 2017 when you saw X? Was it 2022 when you saw Y? But if we can, it's a quick little fun exercise. When was that moment that you knew, yep, I'm going to go modernize EOR through myBasePay, and I'm going to unlock a truly global workforce through Mellow? And what would you say was that moment?
The moment was in 2020 in the middle of a Lifetime movie when I was in the stitch of trying to figure out if I was going to be a work from home mom, and having the opportunity presented to me. And I think it all routed back to advocating for the worker and having, on the ground opportunity to connect what I believe is one of the livelihoods of life, which is to actually go to work and the fulfillment that you get through work and the enablement that you can get through contract labor opportunities. So it was an interesting year for everyone, but it was ever more interesting on my front because I was in the middle of a career transition, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my own life and actually tapping into contract workforce options, but also seeing it from the lens of when this was presented to me, it was truly to advocate, elevate, and enhance the experience of the worker and seeing what that upliftment can do across economic opportunities all around the world. And that's kind of where the why met the how, and the rest was part of our launch.
I love it. And I would put a little bow on it by saying, if the EOR isn't modernized, the individual hurts, right? So that is actually who comes back to being hurt. And we'll talk about that as we go on. And so, Alex, over to you, my friend. What was that moment for you?
I think it was 2029 because back in the day I think I began working with our CEO, Pavel. And, one day I just understood like, oh my God, solar staff as a service disrupts like the industry within like Eastern Europe market, our main target market. back in the day. But after that, like just next day, I realized that, oh my God, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there's like this huge market, because it was just right after the lockdown fall. And I realized that there's like the remote Oyster, just like every big company here in HR market. And I understood that, okay, how we are gonna like what are you going to do with this, all those things, how we will contribute to this market. And I think maybe next week or the next week after that, I realized that we have like our own unique strengths, meaning like we have this contractor of record model. And yeah, I think it was the moment, really crucial moment for me.
So seeing what was happening in Eastern Europe and
Yeah.
saying, "Oh God, this is changing really, really quickly," and we should
Yes.
actually bring it away. So
Yeah.
that dovetails into our first section, which is we're going to be talking about market trends in talent. And I think where you both come in so well is you've both actually lived a fully global world. And that's one thing that a lot of, if we look at like the history of outsourcing, right? Usually, and I make fun of my American colleagues here, I think like 30% of Americans have a passport, right? Pretty low number. And a lot of times when they think about outsourcing, they think of just throwing it across the fence, right? And it's going to be 1/10 the cost, and I'm just going to throw it across and then it'll come back. But you both represent the fact that things are intermingled. And so it might be a designer, it might be a design team. You might not know somebody sitting in Honduras or, Eastern Europe, and they might be just as American, European, whatever it
Yeah.
is, as you. So, with that lens, and if you could actually both kind of explain your global experience as well, but then let's get into where do you see the future of talent and what are some of the significant shifts that have really happened over the past year. So we'll stick in this order, and over to you first.
So I'll take the latter half of the question first in terms of what have I seen within the past 2 years. And I think it's important to preface that when we were considering myBasePay, we really had this launch idea to be relative to domestic talent, right? It's not like we wanted to go global. This was a necessitated force that acts absolutely press the fast forward button and what many future of workforce strategists were actually anticipating to hit by 2025 and 2030. So it was at the crux of us launching and also being at the forefront of what we saw rapidly changing in terms of globalization. Within the last 2 years, I think that it's pretty obvious to state that the tech talent that's within the US is quite competitive, it's scarce, and a lot of it is actually enabled through immigrant visas that are fulfilling the roles that many of these US companies sponsor. So we were dealing with an audience that was simply in a difficult position to find talent. So we spend so much time speaking through cost savings, which are absolutely the obvious facet of what is an advantage of going global is that, yes, there's indicative cost savings that we can apply, but more than that, there's the indirect implication and positive attribute that comes with going global, which is having a steady talent pool of candidates, which was probably
Yeah.
more of an addressment to our clients. And outside of that, it's this retention, it's this loyalty, and it's this increased productivity that we grew an affinity towards, specifically when it came to Latin America, because in comparative with the offshore models that many of our audience segments were dealing with, it actually came to us organically when we got a few calls to support candidates down there. Being that we're based in Texas and we're based in Florida, it just made sense from a proximity standpoint. But those were where some of the indirect advantages that is hard to put a calculation around. So if I could say, what are some of those trends that I'm seeing within the last 1 to 2 years? Yes, it's incalculable to certain programs to have a rate of return for productivity and for tenure and retention. But 1 to 2 years ago, maybe that wasn't as easy. And now we're seeing the utilization of data and data insights and what our data can bring to the table to allow our our audience and our clients to make more savvy decisions, to run comparatives of what pay rate ranges look like, to understand what the average lengths of assignments are, if people are dropping off, if your pay rate actually is higher than what the market is yielding in this specific market. So without a doubt, data and data making decisions has been on the upward trend. But that's kind of our backward story of how we got through Latin America and how we saw that surge increase.
And what? So I love that you call out kind of like the quantitative qualitative, with the qualitative being that it's more than just cost savings. It's retention, it's motivation, it's loyalty, and which results in productivity. But one thing I didn't think about that really is kind of a hook and a good starting point to get someone to pay attention is the H-1B visas, and the fact that if you do go, like I lived in San Francisco, and you can tell because I always wear little fleeces. This is the uniform, right? And so, but the first thing you see is not that many. I'm going to say American born, right? And so a lot of Silicon Valley has been built off of people from all over the world, and you're enabling that without the H-1B process, right? Like that is such a quick thing of like, ooh, wow, I didn't think about that, but everyone kind of knows it. Now, Alex, from you, I know you have some data around the globalization, and you also have an interesting vantage point where, Angie mentioned Latam, and Alex, you're talking about Eastern Europe. And so, first, Alex, if you could frame when we talk about emerging regions, sort of what you guys mean by that, and then second, please just hammer us with data on what you've recently and what you're seeing on the future of talent.
Okay, yeah, sure thing. Actually, I was constantly bowing, when Angela talking because I agree, totally agree with all those things. When I say developing regions, I mean that I'm basically referring to those countries in the world that have been showing like labor force growth for the past 3-5 years, for example, Africa, like Asia countries, Eastern Europe, as I told you before, like. And I think that those regions, they are more, in a way, appealing for companies right now. First of all, because there is a huge, compliance shift. And I think that the compliance is becoming more and more difficult when it comes to hiring people in Europe, for example, or in the UK or US. Everybody knows about like freelance just isn't free act. And I think just like misclassifications and all those things, they will become more and more occurring in a way that it just becomes a new norm. And I see, and our clients, they told us that, why we should, like the logical questions arises, why if the person is so difficult to hire in the European countries or like countries where my business is located, why should I not go to Africa or Latin America where all those people are cheaper and offer do not, often they do not lose out on skills. Why maybe we can like hire people from those regions and like hammering with data. I can say that by our data, US companies, they are reducing their payments by like 40% while working with European pros, for example, right now. But they're increasing those payments by 39% when it comes to Asia markets and by 60% when it comes to MENA region. I think that it shows us that, for example, Africa is a really huge market, and I think that you should go there and look at Africa as a country with great potential. For example, like in not the country but the region. Also, when we're talking about roles, obviously that the most frequent hires are developers, of course, but there's also like analysts, designers, sometimes like even translators or like contractor roles. And I think that there is also some trends that somehow connected with this one, but they are more in the way of new people working models. What I mean by that is that we see that more and more people, they try to work as a full timer in 2 or more jobs. And especially when it comes to Zoomers, we see like 8% year on year growth by our own data. And I think the trend is that, which is actually named as overemployment. Maybe you heard about this one. I think it increasing because, first of all, because of mass layoffs, RTOs, and this kind of uncertainty, and also because people they don't have an elevator pitch with their current place, and I think it's really cool because what we see right now is that even like natural workers, like those who are willing to work 9 to 5, they're trying to shift and trying to find new working model where they can earn more money, and the current like employment model is just doesn't allow them to do this, and all those things they lead us to the current state where the companies is just trying to first find new talent, and second maybe find those talent in the new region. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my read on this.
And I'd say so overall, there's a global directional shift away from full time and one and towards whatever we want to call it, which we could call it
Yeah,
flexible, we can call it full time, but you want to be held more to outcomes or you want to have more flexibility. That global shift is real. Now, here's one of the, and Ange, when I think about the H1B, actually, I think one of the things that is totally happening as well is you don't have to be in the US anymore to get US work. And that is like genie's out of the bottle. And so if you
Absolutely.
go to most US universities, like my grad school, it was mostly international. And 10 years, 5 years ago, they would stay. Now, why would they do that, right? Their regions are just as clean, the infrastructure is just as good. In most cases, they're cheaper. So that's another sort of wave there. Now we're going to get into a deep dive of your specific regions. And I say it for a specific reason and a contextual reason. The contextual reason is that you listeners, I want you to walk away knowing that unless you actually know the regions you're in, you're going to have a hard time truly creating good teams. For example, if you've never been to Vietnam, yet you're trying to build a Vietnam team, good luck. Likewise, if you've never lived in Honduras or Mexico or you name it, good luck. And even me living in Miami, I learned even more so that I did not understand what day of the year
Practically a
everything was.
foreign
Right?
country.
So for you, we're going to do a really big deep dive just into Latam 101. And I'm going to let you, and I'm going to let you direct however you want it to. But the big takeaway for you listeners is that if you don't know it, live it, have family there, good luck trying to understand what Andrew's about to tell you. So, Ange, over to you for sort of Latam 101. And I'm just going to shut up now.
Oh man, I think what is the saying in life? The best way to learn from is often through trial and error, and I believe that we have encompassed a lot of that in the short amount of years that we launched as a company. Like I mentioned earlier, we had this domestic blueprint and this domestic footprint quickly established, and we had the need just by the organic transgression of our pipeline and the demand to go south. And I can't speak for the global perspective, but from the American perspective, going anywhere outside of the US is vastly different, period. Right? We are dealing with governmental bodies that are a lot more regulative and socioeconomic versus our capitalist friendly way of doing business here in the US. That means that there's a lot more protections over the workers, and there are in certain markets ways that you need to and have to engage with said workers. And that was the lesson that we learned across many fronts within Latin America. And this isn't to sound like the compliance police, but there are protections over the workers that can expand the liability that you choose to partake in when you tap into talent pools across Latin America. Things like severance, things like health insurance, whether or not you can even choose to engage in an independent contractor versus an employee. In certain markets throughout Latin America, you can't utilize independent contractor work. And if you do, it has to be under extreme circumstances and situations where you can. So that sort of process for us required quite the undertaking in getting the right general counsel and expert guidance. We are actually, a lot of us are based in Latin America with Latin American roots. So outside of the guidance and the infrastructure that we were able to establish through said guidance, for many of our leadership team, we're a 2-hour flight away from many of the different areas throughout Latin America where we chose and established roots within Mexico all the way down through Colombia and Argentina. So that certainly was a convenience factor. But all of that to say is, this is a rapidly evolving workforce, and as quickly as the workforce is evolving, so are the regulatory bodies that oversee the workforce. So that's something to keep in mind, and it's something to not eliminate the need for you to go global, but just to know what is going to be your fastest route to hit these markets. And it certainly is not going to be the investment and the establishment of the infrastructure over an unfamiliar market. And it's not also to just pitch a commercial to you guys, but outsourcing is, if it's not a competency that you're looking to service in the market, then outsource and outsource that liability, which is truly the way to go when you're talking about foreign markets.
So I'm going to ask you a quick question, Ange, and it's going to actually preview the next section. And so the next section, just a heads up, is going to be risk and regulation. Then after that, we're going to dive deep into success stories and how to get started. So just a heads up for you listeners out there, the next 5 to 10 minutes is going to be like, we're going to scare the crap out of you very intentionally, and then we're going to show you why you should get over here. Okay, so just a heads up, listeners, don't run away yet. It's going to sound scary, but it's actually very, very manageable and predictable. But Ange, a quick question for you before I hop over to you, Alex, about your regions. A quick question for you, Ange, is let's say I go and I hire 1,000 Brazilian developers and I'm paying them through TransferWise, and life is great for 2 years. What would happen? And then what would the impact of that be to me? Would I get a massive tax bill and then I have to shut down all business operations in Brazil? What would happen, and what would be the impact?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of different ways to approach this, and the integrator in me wants to understand: do you have an entity that's set up in Brazil? Are you doing this as an American entity?
I got nothing.
So let's assume
I'm
that
just
you're just paying
transferwising.
folks. Okay. And actually, we see that quite often, and I think the biggest risk out there is from start to finish the lack of contractual establishment with said workers that you are required to have under Brazilian law. But let's say you've been doing this now for 2 years. Those workers in Brazil have to report their income, and usually, if we think about the way that these originating stories around big claims and lawsuits happen, 9 out of 10 times they're happening by the actual individuals that are procuring the work that is being done. So if you're not actually inhibiting yourself to establish processes and steps that can actually avoid that potential from happening, then you are really opening up the bag. So just as it would happen here or any other market in the industry, what is likely could happen is that some of the workers report income, and that's where the effect begins. The government starts to investigate, how did this happen? And then you potentially could be subject to a form of an audit, and then some form of a notification to your organization about tax implications, backtracked taxes, and any kind of result of an audit finding. So I don't think that is very much different from what could happen even here domestically. I mean, that sort of process usually originates with the worker, usually results in an audit, and usually results in fines, penalties, and backtracked taxes that were supposed to be paid out to these workers, subject to the local counties. And that's the boogeyman compliance way of putting it. Sorry, guys.
So I see a bunch of, and virtually I'm seeing a bunch of people run away and, I'm just kidding.
Hop on a plane and go to an island and bye.
Yeah. And don't worry, in 5 minutes, it's going to get really, really fun and sexy. But so, Alex, over to you from a deep dive perspective. So I think one of the questions that we constantly hear from executives when we say the word like emerging regions, right? One is, is it Vietnam? Is it Singapore? Is it Nigeria? Is it all African countries? Is it South Africa? And then also, what are the skills Specifically, is this all data tagging, data labeling? Is this software development? Is this writing? But so those two things are really something we always get. But over to you from a one-on-one perspective on your base.
Okay. First of all, I think it really depends on the region when we're talking about roles. Yes, like for example, in Eastern Europe, there is a huge demand where creative professionals and producers, for example, designers, operators, sometimes like editing persons, like video editing editors, for example. When we're talking about Asia, obviously translators, like some engineers, some like PC operators in a way that those people, they're basically trying like to help with really rudimental tasks and something which can be actually automated. If we're talking about, for example, Africa, I think that there is also actually a huge amount of engineers, especially from South Africa, for example, and Cape Town, for example, having a good amount of really professional developers, backend, front end, iOS, Android developers. So, and if we're talking about like capitals of those like emerging regions, I think, yeah, in a pack, we can say that Vietnam, for example, Thailand, Philippines, India, yeah, obviously. I can say that like there is also, if we are talking about like some minor regions, Pakistan, obviously, some like Kuwait and those like UAE regions, they are really like really appealing for companies. But I can say that when you working with all those countries, you should think not only about like those fines that Angela, for example, mentioned, but you should think about, for example, license. Because, for example, in the UAE or Malaysia, you can work sometimes. You can work as a contractor if you don't have a license, and fail to comply with those rules leads to the fact that the person is basically is subject to fines, the person, like the individual, and may have his account, for example, bank account blocked. And what we see from our clients sometimes, they say to us that, you know, we try to work with those people directly, but eventually we just like lead to the problem for for our own people, and they are trying like to solve those things with their local banks and regulators, and it's a long shot. So I think that sometimes you need to understand, for example, that for example in Eastern Europe and specifically in the CIS region, sometimes the hiring company may like not may but should act as a tax agent and responsible for all taxes, even for contractors and project workers, because it's just like the thing for this specific region. And this non-compliance leads to fines for both sides. And as mentioned, Angela told you that I think that you need to be aware that you don't only need like not only need like to understand those laws, but you need like to be compliant every year, every month, every day, every second. And it's just it's so much hard to do right now when you have all those restrictions. I don't think that anyone have a lot of money to do so, like just to be able like to hire all those laws experts and keep on touch with all those laws and regulations. So yeah, and obviously you have this how to say non-brainer with misclassification and labor regulations when like your contractor could be recognized as a full-fledged employee. So I think that with this specific like challenging and how to say developing regions thing, you should understand there that sometimes companies, and I will touch this thing in the future as well when we talk about like some expert cases, for example, and case studies. Sometimes companies, they understand that those markets, they have a lot of how to say really cheap and really accessible geeksters. For example, as I told you before, like translators, and you need like to hire 500 of them, or like thousands of them, like 500,000 of them. And the problem with thing that you mentioned, like with TransferWise and spreadsheet, is that you just you have a system which is not scalable at all. You're just trying to work with really old things, old-fashioned things, with separate contracts, separate invoices, and I think that those how to say those procedures, they may cost you a dozen of man hours that could be saved, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so I'm going to ask one more scary question, okay? And I do want to call out that part of what you guys are both innovating on is the fact that if cloud computing didn't do what it did, if the internet didn't do what it did, and if AI and automation isn't where it is today, then there would be an answer, but the answer actually wouldn't be that cost efficient because we would just throw humans at it, right? And that's how the typical MSP, VMS, EOR landscape traditionally has been very manually intensive. Not to get too geeky, but that's why from an investor lens, the multiples are quite small because they would say it doesn't really scale. But the question that I have for both of you can answer it, but part of me wants to say only one of you because I think it's a small question, but it's a scary one. And that is when we say it's cheaper, the fear for a procurement department and even just like ethically is that you go, I don't really want to go to bed thinking that I'm just paying people shit wages or lower wages. And procurement goes, oh no, what if we get word that we're paying a bunch of low wages? And we've all seen the books and the interviews related to like the shadow economy, right? And the shadow industry. So I got a quick question, and I think, Angie, you hit on it from the TAM. Tell me about how this isn't just an exploitative race to the bottom, we're going cheaper. Tell me about how cheaper here doesn't necessarily mean cheaper where you're actually hiring from.
Yeah, a lot of that is kind of stemming from what we talked about earlier. We can sit here and shove down every single listener's throat for years, I guess you could say, all about how our cost savings compare to maybe the primary domiciled company's talent pool. Usually, on average, anywhere you're getting global talent, you're looking at a 30 to 60% savings directly on a wage to wage comparison. That is what it is, and that is often the enticing factor that gets people to consider going global. But it is a very dangerous and wary road when we're talking about the race to the bottom, just because of the foreign markets and everything else that we've expanded on in terms of the liability. I would, really challenge everyone to think about what are you doing to partner with in-country local and experts that are going beyond the cost comparative and actually showing face to what do these wages translate to in terms of a competitive profile based off of the talent pool in this specific region of the world. Because if you are going for a race to the bottom, what that also could equate to is an unproductive program. It's a program that isn't competitive. It's a program that only yields a result on a one-to-one, but not on a one-to-many, to create this mature actual pool of talent that people become attracted to outside of the liability. Are we looking to build a cultural affinity, an attractive talent pool, a loyal workforce, and a workforce that can actually yield higher productivity because you're actually offering more competitive wages and out of the box benefits, and partnering with somebody that can show face for that and show you the value proposition that your unique company can bring to this specific market of the world is so much more beyond the liability of doing it the right way. It really is doing it the right way beyond the compliance aspect, but the economic upliftment that this actually can provide to the individual, which then in turn provides this indirect benefit that I keep harping on of productivity, loyalty, and retention, is truly what we try to aim for when we're educating the race to the bottom and the obvious concern that comes with that, and whether or not you're doing it the right way. I would also be very keen to the audience to educate them on what are the wages and what are the burdens that you guys are being charged for on top of that? You know, you can't just label somebody an independent contractor and pay them via PayPal and expect the world to, move and churn. We're dealing with clients that have large programs that are reputable, that want to enable that through their workforce, that are educated and that are savvy, and they usually want to know what kind of burdens are applied to these workers. What are the employer responsibilities? Are they eligible for vacation? Are they eligible for severance, maternity leave, paternity leave? And how is that coming down to the bottom line that we're billing for? So I think those are the major considerations to think about outside of liability when we're talking about the race to the bottom.
And I want to highlight something that both of you guys do, in that echoes this point, which is you got to go. It's more than just paying someone, right? Like it is building an actual community. So, Alex, what you guys do is you guys invest a ton of money in building actual freelancer focused tools for them because you know what they really need more than just the money, right? So you guys really invest deeply into that. And you're building schools, right? You're building schools and you're building hospitals, and and there's numerous pictures of, you in these areas with t-shirts and stuff. And here's one thing I'm going to say for you leaders listening. That is, would you rather do it yourself or would you rather have a partner help you in whatever it is that you want to do? And I'm going to give a quick example of one of my favorite leaders of all time. She has the biggest heart by far. And so she, one of our talent pools was out of Africa. And one of their big problems was that their computers just simply weren't modern enough, right? So they were having to have computers. So she found a way to go to, and this is a big tech company that has some of the best laptops in the world. She found a way to get all of the older laptops that were simply going to get donated. And she literally snuck like 20 laptops throughout all her luggages, snuck it into Africa to give to them simply because she cared so much about those people, right? And when working with both of you, rather than having to do that on your own and risking going to jail, you can just say, hey, Ange, next time you're there, can you give out these t-shirts? Or, hey, Ange, we notice you're donating a school. Can we support that as well? Hey, Al, so I want to make sure you listeners know that. Now, we're coming into our last section. And one of this last section is literally, please, just going to be show off, and show off from a lens of what should every single listener in our audience replicate. And so I'm going to start this one. I think this is going to take about 2 different answers from both of you, okay? I think you're going to ping pong off each other. Alex, I'm going to throw over to you first. What has been an example of success, of a company that's really gotten it, or a leader that's really gotten it? And you don't have to give the exact names, but who are they and what did they do so that our listeners can go and copy exactly that?
I think I can actually, Matthew, because I think Sums Up is a good example. It's a global all-in-one verification and compliance platform. Basically, Binance, I think Paysend, BlaBlaCar, Italki, Capital.com, and other big brands, they're using this tool for their KYC procedures. And we are actually also using this tool because we are clients for both of us. So, this company, what's really interesting is that they have, I think, more than 5,000 contractors across the globe, across 100 countries, like in Laos, in Brazil, in some African countries, in Eastern Europe. So the company was expanding rapidly and operating in those different countries and territories. And to keep with this business, to run this smoothly, they understood that they need a kind of simplified version of their own system, because they just don't want to establish legal connections with contractors in regions with not transparent, for example, banking and tax system by themselves. And they need to find a way to collaborate with, for example, with a specialist in Turkey by using kind of a proxy server in a way of compliant and contractor work. And at the same time, they have this huge amount of contractors, but they have only 10 people or something like this in their payroll and law department to work with all those like a huge amount of people who are doing KYC things for their business. And that's why they needed a solution that at the same time can work with payments and work with all those management things, onboarding, compliance, contracting, and with the zero setup fees. It was a really important thing for them. So that's how they found us, and we were able like to help them to streamline their procedures, and now they are like expanding their business. I know that they're like raising money, and a lot of money, and I think that's a good example when the really global company with a lot of like geeksters and platform workers decided to go with a really smooth system that allows them basically to work with anyone across the globe, especially in those like challenging regions. And they just, as Angelo told before, like outsourced this kind of expertise in the specific region to us. And yeah, we're doing business with them. I think it's a good example, and they are doing a great job within their own field and within like this HR field, trying like to find new ways of employment and find new ways to work with those people.
And so part of what I hear that is consistent across all good programs that we've seen is literally just intentional processes, and
Yeah.
also not thinking that they knew all the processes, but relying on a partner. And Ange, how old do you feel that like 5,000 contractors per 10 employees, and that's just like a thing and normal? You know, like I usually go to companies and I'm like, hey, you're already over half external, which means 100,000 employees and 100,000 contractors. Nope, nope, nope. Now it's like 10 employees and 5,000 contractors. That's insane. That literally means what, like one lawyer? It might even be an outsourced. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
But Ange, over to you. Over to you. Exactly that. Show off. What's a big win? You don't have to give an exact name. You can obfuscate, and we'll play Guess Who. But over to you.
Thanks for that. And yeah, it is an ever evolving sign of the times when you look at the external workforce ratio and overall headcount. We even get asked that, and we certainly drink from our own Kool-Aid because we have a lot of external workers that are critical to the overall success of our company. So we're certainly tapping into the contingent talent pool nature and dynamic. But when it comes to a win, excuse me, I cannot disclose the name of the company. So I'll start off there. And that's because we're under confidentiality with most of our clients. But I cannot go in through this story without crediting some of the overall success of this, certainly with Cesar Jimenez and everything that he's leading through, just being entrenched within staffing and IT, and then the backbone of the EOR infrastructure and engine and compliance throughout the way. But we have an amazing use case that I think perfectly summarizes the synopsis of what we're trying to take away from today's session. And I'll start off by saying that it's not relative to just cost savings. And this is a medical company that focuses on geriatric care throughout the Southeast United States, and they're one of the larger ones. They were looking at building new app developments and UX experiences for the geriatric population. And their issue was simply confronting a scarce talent pool and not having a pipeline of candidates and talent to choose from. So when you're faced with a critical shortage of talent, you're not necessarily thinking through a cost saving structure. You're thinking through tight deadlines that are literally inhibiting your business from moving forward and focusing on product development. So they were able to ramp up developers and outsource their entire IT team to handle these specific projects in Colombia, in two offices within Colombia. And within the span of 60 days, there were 60 people, developers up and running that were handling the productivity needed to get the deadlines across the finish line for these specific projects. And it was a vital project. The government was involved, and it actually helped increase their retention by 20%. So not only were they able to find a pipeline of talent that had this cultural affinity, that didn't have a lot of the accent barriers that we're dealing with sometimes on a global team, that certainly had this symbiotic relationship from a cultural perspective, which was wonderful. They were actually building a solid pipeline of candidates to choose from and continue to grow from. But they were actually able to reduce their turnover or the attrition from 22% to 2%. So, you think about the holistic nature of what this can really do, from retention, from the culturalization of building these teams, from the geographic proximity to allow the leadership team to quickly, be able to build these teams. And then, by the way, they were actually saving well above seven figures every single year when you think about the annualized savings. So that was the cherry on top for what we were able to do for this medical technology company.
So retention, and when I think about what this really is, to be honest, is it really comes down to business competition. And I think a lot of times that people get siloed, right? And they're like, well, I'm a talent leader, I'm an operations leader, I'm a finance leader. It's like, no, listen, we all need to be able to compete. And right now it's never been harder to compete. And one of those is you can't find the talent. Second is the talent leaves. Third is you can't actually build stuff. And so if I were to ask you guys a quick question, if, and this is public data, if for public companies too, if something is delayed by 6 months, guess the percentage of revenue that is lost. And this is delayed by 6 months, which usually it takes more than 6 months to even find someone. But guess the percentage of revenue that's lost.
I have no idea.
50%.
Oh man, I was going to say 20.
It gets so bad that the stock price goes down to 12, right? And so, Ange, what you're hitting on is not just this is cheaper. It is you're actually saving 50% of revenue. So we can say you're driving revenue by 50% and you're driving retention. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come into the sort of Q&A section. And we have a first question. Whoever big is, we will send it to you over. It is, there's actually a lot of different places that we have it public. So Sean asks, I'm interested to learn what are the best practices. Also, Big, if that's your real name, that's awesome. So Sean asked, I'm interested to learn what are the best practices when it comes to addressing talent challenges related to verifying the legal status of a freelancer and navigating tax treaties between countries to avoid tax-related compliance issues. That is a mouthful. I'm totally going to shut up and hand it over to you two. Good luck catching that bomb.
I think it's a really big question. I think what I can do, for example, for you, Sean, I can send you some maybe materials from our site, like some articles about this thing, because it really depends on the region and like on the country. So yeah, just drop me a line, for example, after our beautiful webinar, and I will do my best to help you with like all those things.
And Alex is like, yeah, I'm not taking that. I'm sending that straight.
Yeah. It's not my bullet. It's not my bullet.
Well, I would be part of that, though. I think when it comes to validating the legal status of a freelancer, you're actually harping into the bane of the existence of contract labor, and that is the onboarding process, right? And partnering with a provider, if you are choosing to outsource, that is really critical in understanding what their onboarding process looks like and what information they are collecting to validate that this person is eligible and able to work in the area where the work is being procured, not where they're from, not where they reside, but where they are actually procuring the work. So that's a critical component to certainly want to validate with your team if you're handling that internally, or with the external team if you're outsourcing that, on if they are, validating the legality behind this worker and where are they producing the work. So that's a whole nother show, though. Onboarding and in and of itself is certainly an interesting aspect of the life cycle.
You actually caught that bomb, Ange. I'm proud of you for even catching it. Now, and I would add that a lot of times when we're talking about external talent, contingent talent, flexible work, whatever you want to call it, a lot of times the answers are actually as simple as you're already doing it in your organization. You're just not doing it for whatever the business case you're currently working on is. And so, for example, if you're to look at, how do we verify that this individual is who they say they are? I don't know. How are you doing that with every single part-time employee you have, even every full-time remote worker? Most likely do the same thing and integrate that into the processes of your current contingent talent program or partners that you're working with. So more times than not, that is the answer. And I'll tell you what, we've seen some crazy, crazy processes that ensure this, from the largest tech companies in the world to, I'll give one little hint. One time I was at an ABC, I saw the Vatican. So if the Vatican can do it, so can you. I know it sounds crazy, yeah. So yeah, talk offline about that. But so last question that I got for y'all, unless let's see if there's any more. Okay, perfect. So we have key trends or opportunities emerging in LATAM that talent leaders need to know about, and give a quick up. What are the key trends? Is it higher skilled work? Is it, yeah? What are the key trends?
So, not all countries are subject to this, and I'm more notably going to call out like a country with socioeconomic disturbances, like a Venezuela, for example. But we are seeing a resurgence in a younger population that has been keen to study English from their time that they are in kindergarten. So, if we're looking at the Gen Z and the millennial working populations within LATAM, you are looking at a population that has studied English and that is actually having governmental bodies and support systems that are relative to the spaces within STEM. So it is growing from the educational point within these younger generations all around Latin America. And what that's actually equating to is um, a lot of corporations setting up offices all throughout Latin America. So the competitive market is actually growing within the LATAM region vastly and quickly. So if we're doing if we were comparing cost savings for APAC against LATAM, it might not always be the case that you're looking at cost
Yeah.
savings within the LATAM region, just because the competitive market is growing all around Latin America. There are offices setting up all around Colombia, Brazil, as you gave a reference to earlier, Matt, and all throughout Central America. And you're talking about some pretty big names down there, and not to mention Mexico. So the competitiveness is growing. The cultural affinity, the education, and the focus on STEM is growing just as strong along with it. So those would be the takeaways that I'd give you outside of what we mentioned on some of the statutory oversight needed for this type of worker pool.
Gotcha. And if I could add to, I'd say the one trend that we're seeing, by the way, and this is consistent across mostly LATAM and Asia. I can't say it's validated across the US, Europe, Africa. I just don't have that data. But so across Asia and LATAM, we're seeing that the ability to create a localized business without actually being there is much more than, hey, we got talent from here, but is we actually have a profitable, high growth revenue line, whether it be a service based business or even a product. And when we did a deep dive into how startups are leveraging the future of work, and that was actually the number one sort of thing that they were talking about was, hey, this is incredible. We can go set up an office in Singapore, and by office I mean we can go hire 5 to 15 contingent workers, and we can literally be in that market. And if you look at growth trends, Asia and LATAM are doing a hell of a lot better than most. And now I know that's a broad sweeping, because if we were to say Asia, we're talking about Malaysia and Singapore and whatever. So it's a broad sweeping statement, but it's a revenue opportunity, not just somewhere that you can get some talent. Now, here, I got one last question for both of you, and that is, where do you see most people fail? And you could say one area is that they just throw it over the fence and expect the vendor to do everything. Another could be that they do the opposite and they try to micromanage. One could be they take too long in the sales cycle and they get analysis paralysis. But our listeners, what is one thing that you repeatedly see leaders doing wrong when embracing the future of work? And I'll go Alex and then Ange, final word with you.
That's a good question. I think that picking up the wrong vendor is a great one, because what we see that sometimes, for example, HR leaders, they think that picking up all-in-one HR solution is a much better option for them, but it's not, because they have really specific needs, and after they implementing the huge system, they realize that what we need to do all the things manually, but within this platform we still need like to contract people, we still need to make invoices, we still need like to understand laws, we still need like to support our people with taxes, and they just bombing us with all those questions. And I think that what you really need to do is understand, is it really good way to take a non-brainer here when it comes to your decision? I mean, when you understand that you need a kind of a solution or a vendor with your contingent workforce, or like even your full-time employees with the specific region, because the more understanding of the specific region, the more like understanding of the specific role sometimes you have, the more specific vendor you need. And I think that it's really important to understand that jack of all trades sometimes is a really bad option.
I love that, and I would even add that especially when it's an all-in-one software solution, and
Yeah,
this is such a typical like market. This is such a typical disruption thing where there's a couple out there right now. They're like, right, the all-in-one software solutions, like the all-in-one
yeah,
self portal. But then who are you going to yell at, right? And so an all-in-one solution can happen, but boy, do you need the humans to be able to actually own the
yeah.
indemnification and answer that call when they effed up and you someone to yell at.
That's true.
So, and you
Yeah.
got the last. You got the last word. You can end it, being like, "Don't be this person" or "Be this person." However you want. Over to you. What's the last word?
Well, vendor selection is certainly something, Alex. So commend you on calling that one out. But I actually feel fortunate to say that a lot of the clients that we are dealing with are very selective in their vendor process. They utilize and analyze a lot of the different stakeholders, and they're also very astute when it comes to compliance. So I'm crossing those off the list. Where I have seen some failure is the cultural alignment between these varying talent pools across the globe, and the investment needed to properly oversee and unify these different groups. It cannot be this group in, this part of Africa kind of sitting on their own island after the project has been deployed and we're up and running. It has to be a cohesive nature, and the investment it takes to properly run the cultural alignment thereafter is critical in the overall success of globalization. I think it's one of the more critical aspects that can be easily overlooked, because we're crossing all the boxes off, and then we need to unify and we need to embody this culture globally. By the way, Sean, your questions are awesome. I see it with intellectual property, and I have an interesting story to share with you at some other point, because we're in the midst of that. But if I could quickly answer your question, no, freelancers in our experience cannot retain the copyright for their own work just because we're going global, and there's ways to frame that and do that.
I love it. Okay, listen. If I could say one final thing, I'd say go global. And this is to you, listeners: go global, but be compliant, and then move fast as hell. All right, Ange and Alex, thank you so much for going a little bit over. And we'll have your sort of contact info. Everyone listening, go reach out to them ASAP. And thank you so much for hopping on.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
You guys.
Bye.